So, first topic of discussion, guys. And again, like I said, if you want to join in the chat, super chats are the way to do it. So, let's talk about the writer's strike.
Oh boy.
Obviously, it's kind of like the headline title of the podcast. It will shake the industry. And it kind of will, kind of won't. You know, this is a long time coming. What are our general thoughts of the writer's strike on a whole? Because I'm mixed. I'm mixed on this. I think there's pros and cons. I'm not one of these people that is always like, yeah, pro strike, support the strikers. I'm not one of these people. I think that there are pros and cons, and to blindly follow people that strike, you got to have your own opinion on these things. So, what do you think? Culture.
Me?
I was being pointed to. Go ahead, Culture. You're first.
All right. Not only was it a long time coming, I've been predicting it for better part of 9 months since they started to get into these talks. The industry needs some kind of reform. They also need some safeguards, right? And they don't have any. And they haven't for a long time. And then they saw the up and coming Chat GPT amongst other AIs out there and realized that perhaps that would come for their jobs. So they want to guarantee their jobs, which also includes the number of writers in a room and everything else. Ultimately, this was inevitable, and the studios are not giving ground in any way. They didn't even acquiesce to reasonable demands from the guilds. And you know what? This is going to happen not just in writing, but it's going to happen in the other two major guilds as well. So just buckle up, Buttercup. But as far as the rest of that goes, we could be in for another 07, 08. And that is, that's rough. Will it ultimately mean anything? No, material is still going to get written, made, whatever. It just may not be within the guild. And you're still going to get products coming into other countries, just not the United States from here. The WGA East and West is just not allowed to produce material. You have 11,000 people striking in front of the various studios. They've already picked out the locations in New York and California. And we'll end up with some marginal improvements for the writers at the end of the day, but not anywhere close to what they need, and a ever evaporating pool of jobs. Not to mention the fact that we will go through a second dearth of material. We already went through one because of the pandemic, and now we're going to go through a second one because of lack of writing. I've been here before. I mean, 15 years ago wasn't that long ago. So yeah, it is what it is. Those are my thoughts initially.
Well, so listen, I know we've got friend of the channels, Script Doctor.
Yeah.
I know that obviously, that's not going to color my opinion generally. Hollywood writers are fucking terrible at this point in time. Now, it's a combination of horrendous studio interference. It's a combination of the Oscars putting ridiculous quotas on very specific key artistic elements to completely remove art from any shape or form within media now.
Right.
But Hollywood writers are fucking terrible. They really are. They are. By and large, they're absolutely atrocious. We recently had revealed to us, by way of defending the film, that Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness had 33 rewrites. Now, that is kind of a what came first, the chicken or the egg situation. You're literally 33 fucking rewrites, and that's the best you got. Now, was it the fact that it was a substandard film that was, submitted first? Or was it a good film that was submitted first and the studio wanted to go in and change it? We don't know. But 33 rewrites and that's the best you get? That's fucking atrocious. That is absolutely awful. And this isn't the first. Disney has a lot. And I point out Disney specifically because it's very public. We see a lot of it going on. It's very, very clear as day. We had Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. They reshot the end literally a couple of weeks before the film released. Again, that's rewrites. It's changing the film structure straight away. We had recently, and one of the topics we'll be covering today, is Damon Lindelof pitched a film to Lucasfilm. He pitched a film to Lucasfilm about Rey Skywalker, right? I know the name offends people, but Rey. they accepted it. He got another writer on board to flesh out. So he obviously pitched a story, started to flesh it out, got another writer on board to flesh that story out. They then binned him off. So they liked the initial pitch, they liked the story, then they binned him off. What's going on, right? So at the end of the day, like, it's a what came first, the chicken or the egg situation. I understand, but by and large, the product we've been receiving isn't worthy of pay rises. It isn't worthy of a lot of job security. A lot of these people are in the wrong job. They're in the wrong job because half these films are not even entertaining. You look at the slew of trailers that get released in this day and age. You can, out of 100 trailers that get released, you could pick out on two hands. You count on two hands, right? So only entering double digits. The amount of films that look interesting from 100 trailers. That's embarrassing. That's a shame. So a lot of these writers are unequivocally in the wrong fucking job as it is. They don't have good experience. They're just out of, literally fresh out of uni or whatever it is, high school, whatever it is over there, college. And they're just political activists. Now, again, is it the industry? Is it the industry shaping these writers throughout the academic field to come out and spew this nonsense into the world? Maybe. But by and large, something's got to give somewhere along the line. So I'm not on anyone's actual side at this point in time because the product we've been receiving does not warrant strike action. In fact, it warrants everyone else striking against the fucking films because they are absolutely atrocious of late. Tom, what's your opinion on the right strike? Wow. Tom's dead.
Sorry, somebody's here. I'll be right back.
Oh, all right.
Oh, well, culture.
Okay. Look, I mean, in light of all you said, I mean, I'm on board with you. Ultimately, there's just, and again, you would know this, Nate, as many people that follow us would. It's the below the line people that are going to get hit here because it's everybody else that's affiliated with these productions, right?
And that is always a shame. And I always say this, you know, my rant to one side, I'm very specifically saying that the writers themselves are a joke, right? Yeah. I understand that there are, grips and, techs and stuff like this that I just, your average day worker that's on set as an extra, they don't deserve this. Absolutely not. It's the same thing as when we say that, Disney's going down in flames, but they're bidding off 7,000 employees. These are the normal people. They don't deserve this. And so my rant to one side.
Oh, yeah.
Just to, contextualize it.
But in to add context to that, you're 100% right. I mean, it's their own darn fault. Nothing that we've seen recently has merited praise. Very little, in fact. And when you do make something, a basic entertaining film, such as, I don't know, Super Mario Brothers, you get chastised because it entertained an entire audience and it had a sufficient story to keep everybody engaged for 90 minutes. And guess what? That's plenty long enough for a piece of entertainment, So yeah, I mean, we haven't been delivered any great television in a long time. I mean, there hasn't been something as wonderful as, let's say, Breaking Bad or Mad Men or something like that in a very long time. And those were both full of some progressive messaging as well. So I'm just like, you're right. You're getting a bunch of very lazy young people who have just been indoctrinated to regurgitate the spew and have discovered that they have no talent for writing within that framework. And they're delivering that lack of talent to us regularly. But I don't know. Tom's back. So let's see what he says.
Yeah, Tom.
Timing of everything. Your initial reactions to this, I do mirror. First of all, the writing's been shit. Not many businesses or jobs can you have where you can do things like this and make a living. So in those respects, and also having a guild or whatever to protect you, I mean, not many people have those things. So
we can lose a studio hundreds of millions of dollars, but give us more fucking money. Sorry, what?
Right. And then on the other side of it, though, the writers are the most undersung people, that work in films. But when you have 30 freaking people working on a movie, of course you're going to get shit on the other end, or a TV show. So, I mean, I don't know if that's to blame of the writers themselves, or if that's just too many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, a great example that wasn't brought up already was Star Trek Discovery. Look at all the executive producers on that show. There's more executive producers than there's cast members. I'm not even exaggerating. There's like 30 executive producers listed. And most of these people are basically like writers and other people involved in that. So that's the other thing too. You have creative people who are both writers and producers at the same time. That can create issues because then you have clashing. Yeah, that's the thing, is it takes a million things for everything to go right on a movie or a TV show and one thing to go wrong. And when you've got 10 different people telling you 10 conflicting things to do, it can be impossible. And only so many people like Alex Kurtzman will actually try and work that into something. And that's, I think, a big problem is, a lot of movies, especially not so much television, but movies especially, used to be pretty much the vision of, you had a writer or two, sometimes you'd have writing partners, but you'd have like a writer or two would write a script, and then a studio would buy that script, and then they would have those same writers or a fresh perspective from a new writer and or that director that they choose for that part. But at that point, maybe 3-4 drafts, 5 tops is probably what old projects used to go through on average, if, after being sold to a studio, not counting what they went through in the writing process. Nowadays, how many drafts? 30 some drafts it was that Doctor Strange went through?
33.
And that's the problem right there is, well, see, first of all, Marvel's a completely different animal. They run that shit like a television show, basically. And again, you have like a writer's room. But in that respect, it should not be rewritten that many times. This stuff should be pretty planned out ahead of time, I would think. You should have a lot. You should be like 2-3 years ahead of this shit already.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Any of these major blockbusters where you're spending $200+ million on it.
Yeah.
You're doing that many rewrites. There's something wrong.
Something's wrong. And then, okay, as far as Hollywood in general, like, yeah, I think, a lot of these shows and movies going on strike, shutting them down, good. Because like you just said, a lot of it's shit anyway. Most of these nighttime shows, fuck them. Pardon my French, but fuck them. They're shit anyway.
That's the one good thing. They binned off all the late night talk shows. Piss
or
off.
At least they're on hiatus for now. And then
but what's funny about it is they're like, well, these late night talk show hosts are comedians. Yeah. So why are they now? Why are they cancelled and the writers are gone? I thought you're a comedian. You write your own material.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Surprise to nobody. Just like when we learned about like reality TV, and that's why it's in quotations. These all have writers. It's all written. And part of the reason that a comedian or a host can't just go on themselves and do it, because they are all technically part of the Writers Guild too. So you got to keep that in mind. So to be fair, so it's not like the creator can just sit there and write their own show. They could, but then they'd probably get kicked out of the Writers Guild. So whatever, who cares? But at the same time, it takes a lot of work to write a show every day too. What we do here is not exactly easy. Like, I mean, we do a little pre-planning beforehand, but none of this stuff is scripted. If we actually scripted this stuff out and did like a lot of these other shows did, it would take 2-3 days to probably put one of these together on average. So you're doing that on a cycle. That's usually how these things work. Maybe 2 days it's tops, but it's one of those things. And yeah, so as far as the movies and shows that get killed outside of a few of them, I'm going to go, oh, damn, it will suck and hurt me personally. But other than that, the stuff that we're going to miss out on, I don't think we're going to miss all that much.
But you say that, right? So it's an interesting comparison, isn't it? A live show like this and a late night talk show, right? This show is obviously, it's unscripted. We have our topics, they're topical topics. We come to the show, we do a debrief before we start, and then we dive into it, right? But that's why planning from the conception stage of this show, because that's what this is really important. You make sure you're dealing with people that you've got chemistry with, that you can bounce off right, that you've also got, a range of opinions that can also flow a conversation a little bit more forward. And I bet you a lot of people who would be here in the chat would say something like, this is better right, than a lot of those late night talk shows. And it's not trying to be an ego, but I do genuinely think a lot of people would be far more entertained by real, actual conversations, unscripted, than a late night talk show.
Well, you're probably right. The problem is there's the lack of control. You've got millions of dollars that are invested in these things. You've got a lot of people to make happy. And again, goes into what we were saying earlier with, 30 cooks in the kitchen when it comes to something like this. You've got to appease sponsors. You've got to appease, because if you're doing to a point, yeah, we do, but we don't have the direct connection like, say, like a Tonight Show has with like their sponsors, to where they have an expectation. Right, but we also don't have Aerosmith as our musical guest and Tom Hanks and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a big difference there.
There is, but the relevancy of those kind of shows are going down and down.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not going to argue that.
The viewership is terrible as well, by and large. I mean, they're not very good. But anyway,
Yeah, but we're kind of comparing apples to oranges a little bit there. Like, I mean, I would compare what we do more to like talk radio.
Yes,
more or less.
True. So this article has a pretty good, it's like an overlay of it all. The issues, the stakes, movies and TV shows affected, and how long it will last. I like this. Writers made Zaslav rich.
No.
Which one?
That is hilarious.
That's the worst one I think I've ever seen.
I know. Was that? Yeah, I know. What's that? Toby, you're right there.
No, Zaslav is like the Trump of Hollywood. You have to understand how these people feel about him, right? Like, this is why they're trying to go after him, like using, what was it, the what's her face? Was it Elizabeth Warren? Who's like with a whole we need to investigate Warner Brothers for canceling such things as Batgirl and show.
Oh, that annoyed me. So I was like, "What are you on about?"
I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
These guys have such a hard on for Zaslav. It's not even funny.
But even if you swap Zaslav out for anyone, right? It's like, well, which writers? Because it wasn't all.
They would never put Bob Iger's name there. Is my point.
No, that is true. That is true. So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look a little bit more in depth, right? So Hollywood has been a union town for close to 100 years. And in that time, there's been a little over a dozen major labor strikes. The last being what we know, 2007, 2008, Writers Guild of America work stoppage, which lasted 14 weeks and had a profound impact on the industry. And it did. Like, what was there was a James Bond film that famously was heavily affected because they got a Daniel Craig to write some of it as well or something like that. And remember that?
Are you talking about the last one? That was Fleabag came in to write on it.
No, it's the one before. No.
Oh, then I don't know.
In this 2007, 2008.
Oh, that era? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, the WGA strike started at 12:01 Tuesday, a minute after its contract with the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers expired. The Guild confirmed that the strike indeed would happen about 3 hours prior to the midnight deadline. So this is the coverage, right? So below is a primer covering the issues, the parties involved, and what's at stake for the entire industry. Because make no mistake, it will affect it during the work stoppage. So in brief, deadline, May 1st, issue compensation for writers in a changing media landscape. So jobs at stake, 822,000 direct employees, 2.4 million total supported in 2021. Wow. Industry wages, what is that? 81 billion direct, 186 billion total supported. The market, 261 billion in sales. WGA members, 20,000. So that's the amount of people that are primed, ready to start striking, is 20,000 essentially. 350 plus TV and film production companies. So the two sides, right? On one side are the Hollywood studios, network streamers, and hundreds of other motion picture and TV producers, which make and or distribute most content. They're represented in the talks by the Alliance of Motion Pictures and TV Producers. On the other side is the WGA, which obviously represents the writers in Hollywood who are members, which most working scribes are. Supporting the WGA are many other powerful guilds and unions, including SAG-AFTRA and the Directors Guild of America. So they're pretty big names, obviously. So what's at issue? This is their quote. The survival of writing as a profession is at stake in this negotiation. The WGA said at the outset, noting that many members who previously made a good living are finding it much harder to do so these days. Driven in large part by the shift to streaming, although they're shifting back anyway, writers are finding their work devalued in every part of the business. While company profits have remained high and spending on content has grown, writers are falling behind. So the companies have used the transition to streaming to cut writer pay and separate writing from production, worsening working conditions for series writers at all levels. Now, that's not strictly true because they are moving away from streaming. And they're also retracting the amount of money that they're spending on content as well. In fact, we know that because there's many individuals are like, oh yeah, we productions are like, no, we've got to shrink the amount that we're spending now. So that's not strictly true, but fine, whatever. So in its strike declaration on Monday night, the Guild was more explicit, asserting that the AMPTP is essentially out to create a gig economy, work out of what once was full-time careers. The company's behavior has created a gig economy inside a union workforce, and their immovable stance in this negotiation has betrayed a commitment to further devaluing the profession of writing, from their refusal to guarantee any level of weekly employment in episodic television to the creation of a day rate in comedy variety, to their stonewalling on free work for screenwriters and on AI for all writers. They have closed the door on their labor force and opened the door to writing as an entirely freelance profession. No such deal could ever be contemplated by this membership. What do we think of that, just on a whole? Culture?
Well, I mean, to be fair, the impact of this strike is massive. It's gonna. They outline it there. I mean, you're looking at 2 million plus jobs at however you want to take a look at that. Any kind of stop of work, we've already experienced it. I mentioned it before in the previous segment, where it's just we've seen this before in the global crisis, right? Where nothing happened. What gets stripped further away here, and it's not mentioned in this article or anything I'd heard you guys say, is that this gives the studio carte blanche to move even more into the reality television area.
They still need writers for that stuff, though. That's the problem.
That comes from the producers. 99% of the time, it's the showrunner, the showrunner producer person. But you're right, Tom. They do need an outline. But fuck, ChatGPT is sitting right there. Sorry about the.
That's part of the problem is them opening up the door with AI. Yeah.
Exactly.
So this is interesting, though, right? Because if a Hollywood production uses ChatGPT to write film, they can't copyright it.
No,
you're not allowed to copyright it. So actually, no one owns that script, right? Which actually opens them up to a large. Now, in the UK, AI use is copyrighted.
Right.
If I use AI, I own that. That's mine. I can copyright that. I own the copyright.
Well,
but in the States, it's not the same. And I'm really surprised that they're opening the door to this because you can't copyright it.
All right.
You can't copyright it. Now, maybe what they're trying to do is allow this to go ahead so they can then start using it and then submit for copyright and then go through the battle of obviously getting that, in court. Yes, we can now copyright our AI written scripts, but you're not actually allowed to. You can't. Well, it's not the same in the States.
And again, I don't think they would go about doing it with the actual scripts, because essentially anything you do in reality televisions is a contrivance that's actually just kind of laid out, and roughly how we lay out our shows. We don't have a script. We just kind of have a show concept with some topics that we're going to cover and things.
manufactured drama, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's pretty easy to feed somebody into a situation like, okay, like you prompt Chat GPT. You say, well, everybody's trapped in this one house. They can't leave. They all live in separate bedrooms. They, but
and somebody stole somebody else's
somebody's
something or other, and who did it?
Video game or whatever. Exactly. And so, you can rough that out with Chat GPT to make it less sloppy, but you prompt Chat GPT to put that together. And that's not technically a script. It's just a concept. And then you just slap that out there to everybody to interact with. That's it. And again, I mean, that's why Tom and I laughed is like with that particular strike sign, because Zaslav is the king of reality television. So,
that's part of, and that's a big part of this too. And that goes back to the last one too. And there's a few other things that haven't been broached in this is like, a lot of people are going to be out of work because of this. If this drags on too long, that is a problem. But at the same time, like we just said, pros and cons here. A lot of crap's been crap. Outside of a handful of things, I don't really care at this point. But on the other hand, they're also fighting for this equity thing. Look, this is where Script Doctor, and I do suggest anybody check out his video from last night that he did.
A good job. Yeah.
And he's going to try and hop in, I think, today if he can. If not, I know he's going to show up later on my show. But the thing is that he was saying is like this whole equity in writing thing. This is basically like implementing a minimum wage.
Yep.
And I know it's a hot topic on how people feel about a minimum wage, but the problem with the minimum wage is, go ahead, Culture.
Yeah, that's usually where you're going to get paid, and that's about it. And then from there, they're going to use that as the lowest possible basis to start negotiating from anytime you get a bump up. Not to mention the fact that when you look at the way these are being negotiated, the studio wants to give as small a percentage increase as they possibly can, whereas the guild's looking for 25%. But it's the same problem. You don't have a maximum wage, so you're going to have people that are going to be making. You're not creating this equity situation.
You'll have a bigger gap between bigger, well-known writers compared to some of these other entry-level writers or whatever you want to call them, to where you're just going to have more animosity.
Which is why they're trying to create another tier, right, Tom? Like the writer, producer.
Yes, that's my understanding. It's like, and that's the thing is, I wish I knew more about what exactly was in this whole argument or what they want out of their strike, because I am not as up to speed as I want to be with this yet. So like, I can't comment on everything, but to me, again, I see a lot of the pros and cons here, and AI and some of the other things that they are supposedly discussing and opening the door for are really interesting. And I can't believe that they're doing.
Well, but, I mean, they're literally walking into a hailstorm of bullets is what they are. I mean, no matter what they say, I mean, the vast differences that are described. I actually have a story I used in the 6 Minute Daily this morning from Variety. That particular story breaks it down, like the difference between what the Writers Guild wants and what the studio wants. And they're miles and miles apart. I mean, like I said, one of the things that's different here is they want a minimum size of a room for a television show. They want somewhere in a range between 6 and 12 writers per show. And then that's based on the total number of episodes. They also want a minimum number of weeks of employment per season, so ranging from 10 to 52 weeks. Because, that's kind of how it breaks down. If you ask Script or many other writers, they usually work about 3 shows a year if they're a television writer. So they'll do that. Some are lucky; they only have to work 2, right? But they usually only get like a 2-week interim between like a writing assignment and the next one that they get, and they try to keep those people consistent so they have consistency in the room. But you can always tell when a show falls off or writers get too expensive. Those things correlate. You can always see that happen. Usually around season 3 or 4 or 4 or 5, is when things fall off the rails. But they are also looking at some other things, like we were just talking about these minimums and maximums. But they also want the thing the studio's not going to give them: transparency. Because the writers know that they are being cut out of the value of these shows when they go to streaming. So,
this is something we've talked about quite often in the past, because, and we're seeing that, well, it's going to become less of an issue the more and more we see ad-based tiers implemented into these streaming services, right? Because sooner or later, and this is to explain real quick what we're talking about here, is when shows are on television, Like say a show like Big Bang Theory was a huge success, right? So as that show went along, the higher ratings they got, the more they were able to charge for their commercial spots. More everybody across the board got paid usually in those situations, right? Like that's usually how it would work on a normal television show. Now with the streaming, it's kind of like you're all in up front and you have no idea if the show's going to be a hit or not. And then same thing for the next season and stuff. You never know exactly how much of a hit it is unless it's a show like Stranger Things or something like that that's clearly making huge waves. You can't really gauge it. So the writers and other people who are involved with the show can't really renegotiate in a transparent way what they're worth. And that gap is going to minimize now that they're going to have commercials on with the stuff that's on streaming, because this is going to make a big difference going forward. It's going to turn these streaming services more into what standard television used to be or terrestrial television used to be.
Right
basically.
back to linear. Right back to linear. And there was no point in doing any of this stuff other than the delivery methodology. None. There's no point at this point.
Well, more money, subscription, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but arguably, I mean, I'm going to argue that may not necessarily be the case. I mean, seriously.
No, I agree. No, I absolutely.
I get what
agree,
he's saying. By the time
that
this
was
is all
their
said and
plan
done, it'll be
initially,
pointless. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a plan initially, and then they'll obviously backtrack because they're like, oh shit, yeah, we can't get the money. So, but anyway, so to sort of summarize, to round it all out, I agree with a lot of what everyone is saying, and I am on the side of good writers.
Yeah.
But sadly, and let me be, the sort of nasty devil on the shoulder here.
Ooh.
Sadly, they're fucking few and far between, right? Excuse the language, but they are. And we have seen absolute shit. We have seen absolute tripe. There are loathsome films out there. By and large, that is the market. They're awful. TV shows are crap. Movies are crap. And the writers are a huge part of that. The sooner studios stop relying on terrible writers, then we'd be getting better stuff, right? Like better product, better movies. Now maybe that's because the pendulum swung one way, and then they thought, oh well, we need to get more writers that are associated with a certain thing, so we'll get them on board. And then they've realized that the pendulum's swinging the other way now with the likes of Mario getting such big money, so we need to go get them. I don't know. I don't particularly care, but I'm not massively sympathetic towards I'm not sympathetic towards the majority of these writers, because the majority of them don't deserve the money that they're getting as it is, right? They just don't. And I know a lot of people will be, they're on the side of good writers. I agree with everything everyone said, but they're few and far between. A lot of them are absolute shit. They're garbage. They're absolute garbage. And we see, as someone's just said, nepotism in the chat, right? We see a lot of writers that come up through nepotism. What was the Kasdan's son? I mean, he was on board.
Both of them, actually.
Yeah, there you go then. Do you know what I mean? Like, fuck these people. Like, these people are absolute chumps. They honestly, they couldn't write a children's story. All right. And these are the same people that demanding really good money. No, you shouldn't be in the job. Right? You shouldn't be in the job.
Yeah.
And that's as simplistic as it is. But good writers, I agree. Massively. Closing thoughts, Tom. Culture.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of that. Like I said, we've been on both sides of this. There's a lot to take in, but really at the end of the day, the only shows that I have that are going to be affected are really going to be like Cobra Kai so far. Maybe at worst, Yellowstone is another one that's kind of up in the air. But a lot of the other stuff that's been reported already, I'm like, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So at this point, it's kind of I don't know how to put it. It's a double-edged sword of sorts, because I'm with you. At the same time, it's like, y'all are a bunch of babies. You have a dream job. This is the same way I feel when sports people go on strike, or anybody else who has a job that would be considered above the line, where it's like, oh, boo fucking who. You can work and work your shit out at the same time. I don't understand this. Because what are a lot of these guys going to be doing aside from the few hours they do spend on the picket line? They're going to be at home writing their own personal projects. And when they come out of this shit, they're just going to turn around and sell those projects. So then a lot of them aren't going to be really out any money. The only people that are going to get hurt, and this is the same with any strike, The only people who are really going to get hurt are the people who really need it, right?
Yep.
Are the people who are, you know, struggling and don't have a constant income, or some big name writer, director, producer who's going to be able to just kick back and afford to not work for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months.
Yeah. Culture?
I don't know that I can disagree with anything Tom said. Sorry, I just that's the problem. Is it hurts the below the line people that I know that aren't writers, that are just tangentially affiliated with Hollywood, people that work in the electrics, the lighting, the people that work, you know, in some practical effects jobs. You know, it's in people that are only tangentially related to Hollywood that, you know, just do gigs. And it's sad because, again, you know, the writers do deserve to be compensated, and they do deserve a look at what these shows actually earn. But at the end of the day, you know, this is their last opportunity at leverage, and I think they really should have taken advantage of the previous opportunity. Because if you go back just a few years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, Tom, is that right? Am I thinking correctly? I think that was the point at which they should have taken their stand. Because it would have been,
when it comes to the streaming stuff, definitely.
Yeah, it would have been more terrifying to Hollywood to have not just the global crisis, but also a writer's
They were
strike.
also bleeding the money at that point. Now there's no money to be had, right?
Yeah,
this is the same thing as the last time when they were going after the internet money that wasn't there.
That wasn't there.
Yeah.
Right. No
Like
money.
South Park did that whole episode about it. It's like, that's the joke. It's like, it doesn't exist. So what do you want? Right. Like, and that's the same problem now. It's like, yeah, the money's gone now. Now you should have done it back when these things were being built, right? When they were talking about launching HBO Max and Disney Plus, that's when the writers should have been like, okay, now we need to talk about this, because this is not like standard television to where we're going to be compensated correctly.
Changes the dynamic. Yeah.